I never thought the woman I planned to marry would walk out on me for another man. But life has a strange way of turning heartbreak into power. My name's Ethan Cole. And a few years ago, I thought I had everything figured out, a steady relationship, a startup that I believed would change the world, and a dream big enough to blind me from reality. Madison and I met during college in Boston. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made every other noise disappear. Smart, confident, the kind of person who spoke like she already knew how her life was supposed to turn out. For 4 years, she stood by my side as I built my small software company from scratch. She used to tell me, "Ethan, one day your name's going to mean something." I believed her. I believed in us. But dreams don't pay rent. And hope doesn't impress investors. When my company failed to secure funding for the second time, the silence between us started to grow. Our apartment, once filled with late-night brainstorming and cheap takeout dinners, now felt like a waiting room for bad news. Madison began staying out later, saying she was meeting old contacts for work. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I knew something was changing. One night, she came home wearing a new dress, one I hadn't seen before. Expensive, elegant, something that didn't belong in our struggling life. She said she'd gone to a charity gala downtown, one she was invited to through a friend in marketing. I didn't think much of it. I just remember the way her eyes sparkled when she mentioned a name. Blake Turner. At first, it was casual. "He's just someone I met at the event," she said. "He's the CEO of some tech company, Next Gen Systems, I think." I brushed it off. CEOs were her world now, not mine. But within weeks, things started slipping away. Our conversations turned short. She stopped asking how my meetings went. The warmth in her eyes, gone. Then one evening, she sat me down. I can still feel that silence before she spoke, that awful stillness before your heart breaks. "Ethan," she said softly, "I can't keep doing this. I've waited for your breakthrough for years, but I can't wait forever for potential. I need more stability. I need a future." Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. I remember asking, "So what does that mean? You're leaving?" She didn't answer. Not directly. She just stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the door. Before she left, she said, "Blake believes in what I can do." "I'm sorry, Ethan." That was it. No screaming. No tears. Just a quiet ending to 4 years of shared dreams. For days I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed that moment over and over, the sound of the door closing, the echo of my own breathing. I tried drowning it out with work, with distractions, with anything. But heartbreak has a way of filling every silence. I saw her on social media a few weeks later, smiling beside Blake, dressed in luxury, attending events I once dreamed of sponsoring. She looked radiant, untouchable. I wasn't angry at first. Just hollow. Like someone had taken everything inside me and replaced it with noise. Friends told me to move on. But how do you move on when your dreams and your heartbreak are the same person? I started questioning everything, my talent, my purpose, even my worth. I avoided mirrors because I couldn't stand the man staring back. A man who gave everything and still lost. But pain does something strange to you. It either breaks you completely, or it shapes you into something unrecognizable. One night, as I sat in my dark apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and fading memories, I made myself a promise. If I ever rose again, if I ever built something worth remembering, I'd make sure she remembered who she left behind, not out of hatred, not even out of pride, but because I needed to prove, at least to myself, that I wasn't the failure she walked away from. That night changed everything. The man I was, emotional, desperate, uncertain, died quietly in that room. The man who replaced him was colder, more focused. Someone who understood that sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about evolution. And so I began again, alone, determined, fueled not by love, but by the memory of loss. That night I promised myself, if I ever rose again, I'd make sure she remembered who she left behind. I didn't know a person could fall that far and still hear his own heartbeat. After Madison left, the days blurred. Rent notices, rejected emails, empty coffee cups stacked like small failures on my desk. I remember lying awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling of my tiny San Francisco apartment, asking one question on repeat: what if this is all I am? The quiet in that room felt heavier than any argument we ever had. Rock bottom isn't a single moment. It's a slow slide. You think you can stop it, and then you realize you're already on the floor. I was sitting in a half-empty cafe in Soma when the door opened, and a gust of cold air cut through the room. A man walked in, late 50s, crisp gray suit, eyes like he'd seen every market cycle, and still kept his optimism on a short leash. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, and sat 2 tables away from me. I didn't know him then, but I would soon learn his name carried weight in every boardroom between Palo Alto and New York. Marcus Reed. A venture capitalist with a reputation for spotting resilience where others only saw risk. He noticed the pitch deck open on my laptop, the one with too many edits and not enough answers. "You presenting today?" he asked. His voice was steady, almost kind. "Not anymore," I said. "Investors passed. Twice." He took a long look at me, then at the deck. "You wrote this?" "Yeah," I said. "Twice." He smiled without humor. "I can tell." He pointed to a page full of buzzwords. "You wrote this for approval, not for truth. Investors smell that." I bristled at first. Then something in me gave way. I told him everything in a few short sentences: how I lost funding, how she left, how I felt like a bad headline waiting to happen. He listened without judging. When I finished, he tapped the table once with his knuckle. "You're not out," he said. "You're just new." He slid a business card across to me. "Come by my office tomorrow. Bring the truth, not the pitch." That night, I didn't sleep from fear. I stayed awake from hope. Marcus worked out of a modest office in the financial district. No flashy art, no neon logos, just quiet focus and a whiteboard covered in questions. He didn't offer money. He offered something harder: mentorship. "If you want to build anything that lasts," he said, "start by rebuilding yourself." Our first lessons weren't about lines on a chart. They were about lines in my head. He taught me what investors actually look for: unit economics, not slogans. Teams that solve real pain, not chase trends. The difference between growth and bloat. He walked me through market cycles, exit strategies, risk exposure. But more than that, he trained my mind. "Strategy," he said, "is the story your numbers tell when you're not in the room." He made me defend every assumption until the weak ones fell away. I learned quiet patience, the kind that doesn't need applause. He also introduced me to a world I once ignored: business psychology. He showed me how founders behave under pressure, how board members act when a vote gets tight, how pride makes smart people blind. "People don't make deals," he said. "People make decisions about people, and then they sign deals." I rebuilt my body too. Marcus had a rule: be in the gym by 6 a.m. "You can't carry a company if you can't carry yourself," he'd say. I started running the Embarcadero at sunrise. I swapped takeout for real food. I slept on a schedule. The mirror didn't scare me anymore. I could see something returning to my eyes: resolve, not rage. Months became years. The chaos faded into discipline. I stopped trying to be the next big name and focused on being the man with a steady hand. I began with micro investments, small checks into overlooked startups that had grit but lacked guidance. I didn't just write a check. I rolled up my sleeves. I helped founders clean their financials, cut vanity costs, and focus on the few metrics that actually move a company forward. Some bets failed quietly, cleanly. Others found their rhythm. A logistics startup in Ohio tightened its margins and doubled revenue. A medical scheduling tool in Texas found product-market fit after we changed its pricing. A cybersecurity team in Seattle won 3 major contracts after we repositioned their pitch. Little by little, my portfolio grew not loud, but strong. Marcus taught me the art of acquisition. Control isn't about titles, he said. It's about leverage. I learned how to negotiate SEFE notes that converted at the right time. How to build alliances with early angels. How to structure buyouts that protected teams and gave companies a future. I wasn't a dreamer anymore. I was a builder with a ledger and a plan. And then, one winter afternoon, I saw a familiar name on a market brief. NextGen Systems, the company led by Blake Turner. The same Blake who stepped into my life like a door closing. The brief praised his rapid expansion, new offices, new products, aggressive hires, splashy partnerships. But the numbers beneath the headlines told a different story. I read the debt structure twice. I checked supplier terms. I mapped cash conversion cycles. The pattern was clear. Over-leveraged. Fast growth, slow discipline. Lots of noise, not enough signal. I sat back in my chair and felt something sharp and cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. I knew this playbook because I had lived with the consequences of its mirror image. Growth without grounding. Flash without foundation. I took the brief to Marcus. He skimmed it, then looked up at me with a small nod. What do you see? Cracks, I said. If the market tightens or a key partner pulls back, they're exposed. If an investor with patience steps in, they'll need him more than he needs them. Would you be that investor? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I thought of Madison's last words. I thought of the promise I made in that dark room years ago. I also thought of every founder I'd helped, every lesson I learned after I lost everything. Revenge whispered from the past. Discipline spoke from the present. Finally, I said, not as a bruised ex. As a strategist. Marcus smiled. Good, then act like one. Do your homework. Move quietly. Remember, power is a position, not a performance. Over the next few weeks, I dug in. I met with suppliers who were overdue on payments. I heard rumors of a rushed product launch and a delayed audit. I spoke to 2 early investors who wanted stability, not headlines. Little threads appeared, and when I tugged, they led to real conversations. We love the vision, one said, but we're tired of firefighting. Each night, I wrote down one sentence before turning off the light. Pain taught me what comfort never could. It kept me honest. It kept me steady. I wouldn't chase chaos. I would build order. Then came the moment everything clicked. I was looking over a term sheet draft for a different company when my phone buzzed with a market note. NextGen had announced yet another expansion, new office. New hires. Same applause. But tucked in the footnotes was the reveal I'd been waiting for. They were seeking a strategic investor to support scaling. I leaned back, letting the city noise drift up from the street below. Fate doesn't hand you revenge. It hands you opportunity. The question is whether you're ready to take it without losing yourself. I closed my laptop. The plan wasn't to make noise. It was to make moves, quietly, precisely, patiently. And as the winter light faded beyond the skyline, I knew the next chapter wasn't about proving I had worth. It was about proving I had control. Because the man I was back then wanted to be seen. The man I am now wants to be remembered for what he built, not for what he lost. I picked up the phone. Marcus, I said, calm and clear. It's time we talk about NextGen. I thought I had buried my past long ago. But life has a strange way of bringing ghosts back, especially when you least expect them. It was a bright spring morning in Los Angeles. I was attending the Global Tech Summit, one of those massive conferences where everyone wore confidence like a badge. My firm had invested in 3 companies presenting that year, and I was there to quietly observe. No headlines. No press. Just strategy. As I walked through the main hall, shaking hands and nodding at familiar faces, a sudden voice stopped me cold. Ethan? Ethan Cole? That voice. I hadn't heard it in years, but it hit me like a flash of old lightning. I turned. And there she was, Madison. She looked radiant, dressed in a sleek white suit. Her hair perfectly styled, her smile polished. But behind that smile, there was something else. Unease. Guilt. Maybe the kind you hide when you've built your world on unfinished stories. For a moment, time froze. My mind took me back to that tiny apartment, the half-empty closet, the sound of a door closing. But I didn't let it show. Madison, I said evenly. It's been a while. She tilted her head with that same confident charm she used to have. It's been years. You look different, successful. I smiled faintly. I try. Her laugh sounded rehearsed. Well, I guess all those late nights paid off, huh? That's when a familiar voice joined in, a voice I'd only heard through media interviews and industry talks. Madison, there you are. The keynotes in 15 minutes. Blake Turner. The man she'd left me for. The man whose company had built an empire on borrowed stability. He extended a hand, polite but dismissive, his eyes scanning me like I was a fan waiting for an autograph. And you are? I shook his hand firmly. Ethan Cole. For a second, there was no recognition. Then he smiled in that patronizing way rich men do when they think they're safe. Right, Madison's old friend. From back in her startup days, wasn't it? Old friend. The words rolled around my head like an insult. But I kept my composure. Yes, I said calmly. Old times indeed. Madison tried to bridge the tension. Ethan's in investments now, Blake. He's done really well. Blake shrugged. That's great. Always good to see young people finding their way. He didn't know it yet. But the young man finding his way already owned stakes in half the companies that powered his infrastructure. As they left for his keynote, Madison gave me one last look. Her smile faltered for half a second. And in that moment, I saw it, the unease she tried so hard to hide. When the lights dimmed for the next session, I sat alone at a corner table, watching Blake Turner deliver his speech about innovation, ethics, and the future of leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. His words sounded polished, his tone confident. But something about his energy felt forced, like a man building castles on sand and hoping no one noticed the cracks. Later that evening, back in my hotel room, I couldn't shake the encounter. Madison's eyes lingered in my thoughts, not with love, but with curiosity. What was she doing there? Why did she look uneasy? So I started digging. I called a contact from my network, someone who tracked corporate filings. Can you pull me the latest on next-gen systems? Debt structure, board updates, supplier contracts, everything. By the next morning, the documents were in my inbox, and what I found told a story even Blake wouldn't want to read out loud. Next-gen looked strong on the surface, high revenue, big partnerships, glowing headlines. But underneath, it was fragile. Debt stacked on debt. Rapid expansions funded by short-term loans. Suppliers waiting months for payments. Leadership turnover in key positions. And the most dangerous sign of all, they were quietly looking for new investors. The cracks were showing. Not to the public yet, but to anyone who knew how to read between the numbers. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile forming. He saw a man from her past, I whispered to myself. He didn't see the man who was about to write his future. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity. I wasn't the broken man she'd left behind anymore. I was someone who understood the long game. Someone who knew that real revenge isn't taken in a moment. It's built with patience. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. Did Madison know about the cracks? Was she staying out of love or fear? The next day, I saw them again in the hotel lobby. She caught my eye briefly, then looked away. Blake was on the phone, pacing, tense. Even from across the room, I could tell something was off. As they stepped into their car, I noticed the way Madison glanced back through the window. Just for a second. But in that look was something haunting, a silent warning, or maybe a silent plea. Either way, it didn't matter. Because now, I had what I needed: information, leverage, and purpose. The ghosts of my past had returned. But this time, I wasn't running from them. I was following them. And soon, very soon, they'd realize the cost of walking away from the wrong man. That night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I began sketching out a plan, not of revenge fueled by rage, but of strategy fueled by truth. Because fate doesn't hand you revenge. It hands you opportunity. And when opportunity finally knocked, I was ready to open the door. Some people chase revenge with fire and fury. Me? I prefer silence, because revenge that lasts isn't taken in anger. It's written in contracts. After the conference, I spent weeks studying every corner of next-gen systems. The company looked solid from the outside, but I knew better. The numbers whispered their secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. Overextended cash flow, late supplier payments, frustrated investors. Blake Turner was trying to grow faster than his balance sheet could breathe. And that's where I saw my opening. I didn't move in my own name. That would have been too obvious, too emotional. Instead, I worked through Cole Strategic Holdings, a quiet investment firm registered under a different management team. Nobody connected it to me. Not even Madison. My first move was small. Just a few shares, a test of the waters. Then another. Then another. Slowly, silently, I began buying pieces of NextGen, bit by bit. At first, no one noticed. Blake's team was too busy trying to impress the media with new product launches and PR campaigns. But the people behind the curtain, the early investors, the tired board members, they noticed me. I started getting quiet calls. Investors who were once loyal to Blake now wanted stability, transparency, leadership that didn't gamble with the company's future. I listened more than I spoke. That's how you build alliances, with patience, not promises. One afternoon, I met with one of NextGen's original backers, a retired venture capitalist named Ellen Ward. She leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Blake's brilliant, no doubt," she said. "But brilliance without balance becomes chaos. If someone could steer the ship before it hits the iceberg." Her voice trailed off. I smiled slightly. Then maybe it's time someone else took the wheel. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Weeks passed. My shares grew. My influence grew. And with every percentage point I gained, Blake's control slipped a little more. Then one night, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in years. Madison. I let it ring twice before answering. "Ethan." Her voice trembled slightly. I didn't know who else to call. I leaned back in my chair. "I'm surprised you remembered my number." She hesitated. "Blake's under pressure. Investors are pulling out. He's been different lately. Angry, stressed. I'm scared, Ethan. What's happening to him?" I took a breath, keeping my tone even. Business has a way of exposing who we really are when the money fades. "Is there anything you can do?" She asked softly. "You're connected now, right? People listen to you." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the night she walked away, leaving me with nothing but silence and broken dreams. Funny how life circles back, doesn't it? I said quietly. She didn't respond. Just silence. Then a soft goodbye, and the line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the window, the skyline glittering behind me, and whispered to myself, "This isn't about her anymore." The following month was a masterclass in quiet control. Blake Turner was scrambling. He needed new capital fast. NextGen's cash flow had become a ticking clock. So he went looking for investors, big ones. He pitched to everyone, from New York hedge funds to Silicon Valley giants. What he didn't know was that every firm he approached had already heard from me. Cole Strategic Holdings, my firm, had quietly warned them off the deal. High risk, we told them. Unstable management. The kind of words that make investors run the other way. Blake had no idea who was pulling the strings behind the curtain. Each time his calls went unanswered, each time a meeting fell through, I was one step closer. And slowly, his empire began to tremble. One evening, Ellen Ward called again. "Ethan, the board's losing confidence. They're tired of surprises. If you can secure another 10%, you'll have a controlling stake." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "It's already in motion." I hung up and looked at the papers on my desk. Ownership charts, shareholder agreements, legal filings. Every piece was falling perfectly into place, but I didn't feel triumph. Not yet, because revenge isn't about noise. It's about timing. You wait until the right moment, when they still think they're winning, and then, with a whisper, you change everything. That night, I walked out onto my balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below. The air was cool, calm. Somewhere out there, Blake was probably pacing his office, trying to save the company he thought he controlled. He didn't know that every move he made was already written in my playbook. I smiled. Not with arrogance, but with quiet satisfaction. "Revenge isn't loud," I murmured. "It's a whisper in boardrooms, a signature on paper." And soon, one more signature, mine, would change everything. Because I wasn't just coming for his company. I was coming for the story he thought he owned. The same way he once took everything that was mine, I would take everything he built. Without raising my voice, I turned off the lights, closed my laptop, and poured myself a drink. The game was in motion. The pieces were set. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing my past. I was rewriting it. Some moments in life feel like they've been waiting for you. This was one of them. The boardroom was silent, except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the ticking clock on the wall. Every chair around that long oak table was filled. Executives, shareholders, advisors. All waiting. All tense. Blake Turner stood near the head of the table, calm and confident, wearing that same smug smile he'd always worn in interviews, the kind that made him look untouchable. He was convinced that today would be his victory. Today, he thought, the board would approve a new round of investment to save his company, his empire. But what he didn't know was that I was already sitting in the very room where his fate would change. Not as the man she left, but as the man she could never see coming. The meeting began. Blake stood and started his pitch, voice steady, posture perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "NextGen Systems is entering a new era of growth. With the right capital infusion, we'll scale faster than any competitor in the market." He moved through his slides confidently, numbers glowing across the screen, projections, partnerships, promises. Every sentence felt rehearsed, smooth, controlled. But I saw through it all. I knew those numbers were smoke. And the people in that room were about to see it too. When he finished, the chairman, an older man named Harold Denton, looked around the table. "Thank you, Mr. Turner. Now before we finalize this round, we'd like to introduce the lead investor who has agreed to back the firm, providing the capital." Blake straightened his tie, relieved. He didn't know the name of the investor. The deal had been arranged through my holding company. Then the door opened. I stood. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Blake's smile faded as recognition hit him like a slow earthquake. Madison, seated near the end of the table, froze mid-breath. Her hand trembled slightly on the table. "Ethan?" Blake said, confused laughter breaking the silence. What are you doing here?" I met his eyes calmly. "Good morning, Blake. I believe I'm the one you've been waiting for." Whispers filled the room. The CFO's pen slipped from his fingers. Madison's eyes widened in disbelief. Blake blinked, still trying to catch up. You're the investor?" I nodded. "Through Cole Strategic Holdings, yes, the firm that now holds controlling interest in next-gen systems." Gasps echoed around the table. Blake's face turned pale. "That's impossible. We've done due diligence." Due diligence?" I said softly. "Apparently not enough." I walked to the head of the table, my steps measured. "You once told me I had no future, Blake. Well, turns out my future bought yours." The room went completely silent. You could almost hear his confidence breaking. The chairman cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mr. Turner, the board has reviewed your performance over the past year. Declining profits, investor dissatisfaction, reckless spending. It's time for change. The motion on the table is to appoint Mr. Cole as interim CEO, effective immediately." Blake's voice cracked as he protested. "This is absurd. You can't just walk in and—" "Actually," Harold interrupted, "we can. The vote is binding." One by one, hands rose around the table. Ellen Ward, the retired investor I had befriended, looked at me with a quiet nod before lifting hers. Then another, and another. When the final hand went up, Blake's shoulders sank. The empire he'd built on arrogance had just shifted into my hands. The chairman turned to me. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole." I gave a polite nod. "Thank you." Blake stood there, shaking his head, disbelief written all over his face. "You planned this all along?" I met his gaze one last time. "No, Blake. I learned to wait for the right opportunity. You created your own downfall." As the meeting ended, people gathered their papers and whispered among themselves. Madison stayed seated, her eyes never leaving me. When the room emptied, she finally stood. "Ethan, please. I need to explain." I took a slow breath. She looked different now, not the confident woman from the gala years ago, but someone worn by regret. "There's nothing to explain," I said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. I stopped her gently. "Madison, we already had our closure years ago. You just didn't realize it." Her eyes glistened as she stepped closer. "So that's it? You just walk away?" I smiled faintly. "Exactly." I turned toward the door, pausing for a moment before leaving. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone, Madison. I came here to take back my power. What you two took from me wasn't love, it was belief in myself. And now I have that again." I walked out, each step echoing through the hall, behind me. Silence followed, the kind of silence that only truth can leave behind. As I exited the building, the California sun hit my face. The wind felt different, freer somehow. That day, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, breathing in the reality of what had happened. I'd spent years preparing for this moment, not just to take revenge, but to understand it. And what I learned was simple. Revenge doesn't fill the emptiness. It just clears the space for peace to walk in. And as I looked at the reflection of the city in the glass tower above, I whispered to myself, sometimes the sweetest victory isn't proving them wrong. It's proving to yourself that you were always right to believe. Some endings don't explode. They fade quietly like the last note of a song you didn't realize was about to end. After that boardroom meeting, everything changed. Blake Turner was gone from next-gen systems within a week. The same media that once called him the golden boy of tech now called him reckless, overconfident, unstable. His reputation collapsed faster than the empire he built. He tried to fight it, of course. He gave interviews, blamed the economy, blamed the investors, even hinted at betrayal. But the truth had already spread through the market. No one trusted him anymore. As for Madison, she disappeared. No press appearances. No interviews. No social media. Just silence. I heard rumors that she left Los Angeles for a quieter life somewhere up north. I didn't follow up. Some ghosts deserve their rest. My focus shifted to the company now under my care. The same company that had once symbolized my heartbreak. Next Gen was broken on the inside. Departments were burned out, employees were underpaid, and entire divisions were hanging by a thread. But beneath the mess, I saw potential, not for money, but for redemption. So I did something unexpected. I didn't tear it apart. I rebuilt it. The first thing I did was clean house, not with anger, but with fairness. The toxic executives were replaced with people who valued integrity over image. I reopened closed projects that had been buried for not being flashy enough. I gave bonuses to the teams who'd stayed through the chaos. Every Friday, I walked the floors, not as a CEO, but as a man who'd once been on the other side of failure. I listened. I asked questions. I made sure no one felt invisible again. Within a year, Next Gen had stabilized. Within 2, it was thriving, honestly this time. But no matter how many victories came, I never forgot where it all began, in that small, dim apartment years ago. Surrounded by silence and heartbreak. One night, after a long board meeting, I sat alone in my office, staring at the city lights through the glass wall. I had everything I once thought I wanted: success, respect, peace. But instead of joy, I felt something else: reflection. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase the pain or undo the betrayal. It just reminds you of who you've become since the day you were broken. And that reminder, that growth, is what keeps you grounded. A few months later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photo: a quiet town, a bookstore on the corner, and a woman sitting at a small table outside. Madison. She looked peaceful. Not glamorous. Not lost. Just human. There was no note, but she didn't need one. The message was clear. She had moved on. And so had I. I set the photo down, smiled faintly, and let the memories fade like old film. From that day on, I stopped chasing victories for revenge. I chased them for purpose. I used the company's profits to fund startups run by people like the old me, dreamers without connections. Founders who'd been turned down too many times. Every time I shook one of their hands, I saw a younger version of myself, lost, desperate, but still holding on to hope. Helping them succeed felt better than any victory over Blake or Madison ever could, because this time my success wasn't born from anger. It was born from understanding. One evening, while closing up my laptop, I found an old folder buried deep in my files. It was my first startup pitch, the one everyone rejected. I opened it and smiled. The ideas were naive, the design was terrible, but the passion was real. That kid, the one everyone doubted, the one Madison left behind, he didn't fail. He just hadn't grown into his time yet. I whispered softly, "You made it, kid. You really did." Now, whenever I look out at the skyline, I don't see revenge anymore. I see evolution. I see a man who lost everything and rebuilt from nothing. A man who turned betrayal into wisdom and heartbreak into discipline. And I've learned that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation, because when the people who doubted you finally see that you didn't just survive, you evolved, that's when the story really ends. So, if you're listening to this, wondering if you'll ever recover from betrayal, remember this: don't let it break you. Let it teach you. Don't chase them. Chase your purpose, because the greatest justice you'll ever serve is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's evolution. Because when they see you rise without them, that's when the story truly ends. Sometimes the greatest comeback isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always enough. If this story hit your heart, like, subscribe, and join me for more stories of revenge, redemption, and rebirth, because every ending is just the start of a new chapter.